Ron Davari, the founder of NewOak Capital, is here to talk a little bit more about this. So, Ron, part of this story is saying, you know, all right, so you didn't pull the trigger if you're the Wall Street firms, but you handed them the gun. Basically, with the security. This is what the New York Times is saying. I mean, what do you think about that take now, looking back on Wall Street and placing the blame there?
The swaps with an upfront is fairly common instrument. Where, in this particular case, I'm having a hard time figuring out the magnitude of this compared to the size of the Greece's deficit.
You're saying the magnitude of responsibility on the firms,
no,
or
no,
the magnitude of that swap
market? How much they could have raised. Obviously, this is taking, you know, essentially today's obligation of spreading it over a long term, and that because the governments don't really have what is considered a real balance sheet, it's very difficult to actually incorporate that in your analysis of a government. So a lot of people use the swap market as a way of raising capital, and that's instead of, for example, issuing debt. So I think that this is a little bit of a spin, in my view. But you know, obviously the currency markets, the rate markets, the swaps are pretty common. A lot of central banks get into it. This is what is referred to as out-of-the-money swap, or in the money swap, where they actually Greece would raise some capital up front. And I wouldn't put too much importance on this. I would focus on the real problem, which is, you know, the deficit reduction, the financial responsibility that Greece has to really follow, and that's where really the focus should be at this time, not on Goldman Sachs.
Well, maybe without getting so wonky with, you know, talking about the swaps and the impact and all that, you know, if you were to take something away from this, because this is a really interesting point that the Times makes here, and they actually kind of clearly define this by pinning it on the fact that the euro was undermined by enabling European governments to hide their mounting debts. You know, can we really point to that as the prime reason for the problems over in Greece?
You know, let me go back. You know, when the Fed announced, for example, they guaranteed the swaps of major countries, any country could actually, in effect, issue U.S. dollar debt and swap that, issue in their own country debt and swap that back into U.S. dollar, in effect raising you know, our currency in the marketplace, the supply of our currency. So the derivatives market have a way of distorting the facts. You know, this is always going to be the case. So nobody really focused on that as much. That was a big.
So that's how they were hiding the debt.
That was, well, not only that, we actually gave our sovereign power. For example, New Zealand or Australia could actually issue U.S. debt in effect by issuing debt in their own currency and swapping that to U.S. dollar, and that would be backed by the Fed. So that would be, in effect, putting more obligation on the U.S. because now that obligation is a U.S. obligation. So this is not so different than that, for example.
Okay, so as of today, though, we don't have a deal. I mean, there's no real deal we have for Greece. We have lip service coming from the EU, and in a lot of different directions. What do you think the market needs this week? Do they need a firm plan, a dollar amount? Do they need a plan from Greece? I mean, this seems very non-committal, although there has been statements made about what actually is going to be done here.
They have said that they will definitely back Greece, but they have not identified in what form, because that puts them in a box.
Right.
And they don't want to go in a box because then the next thing that comes out, this is going to set a model. This is what I consider a testing time for the euro system in general, European monetary system, because it was not a fiscal union, it was a monetary union, and it left a lot of holes. And now we're testing how the European Union is actually going to be able to deal with it. As a matter of fact, in their charter, they actually said the bailouts were not allowed.
Right.
Now we're saying that, oh yeah, we need, you know, initially Germany and France really hooked on that we can't really do a bailout, it's illegal. We can't do it based on the format.
It seems like the markets, I mean, the markets in Europe are doing fine today. Maybe it's just this conversation, the rhetoric is all the markets need.
I think once the Greece defaults, then it's not
exactly.
I still put a lot of weight on this because there's a lot more to come. In my view, this is
and this is the first time that any EU member has had to bail out one of its own.
This is a big story. I think the equity markets sort of neglected it because we like to focus on the real economy. But if you have one of these major countries default, then you have the credit markets falling on its face, and then next thing you know, the equity market always lags. So I want to be. I'm watching this very carefully.
All right.
I'm putting a lot of importance on it. Yes.
All right, Ron Davari, NewOak Capital will continue to watch this story very, very closely for everybody.